How tough was this story to do?
One of the toughest of my careers. 3 years of fighting for something, not knowing how you're going to get those answers.
He was a really nice man. He didn't deserve to die.
His life was taken way too soon. They had stated that they just couldn't believe he would shoot himself in front of his children.
There's no way that this gun could have shot this bullet.
The ballistics just didn't match.
I saw the guy pointing a gun, and I saw the car.
Those children said to us, someone just shot our daddy.
I really think they should believe me.
The very first words out of my daughter's mouth was, "Did they catch the guy that did it?"
We're onto something here. It didn't add up. Yeah, well, I can tell you exactly what happened that day. I came in on a Monday morning, and we started our editorial meeting, and we talked about the events of the weekend, and it came up that there was this accident near this church off of Hull Street Road, and a father was killed with his 4 children in the car.
It was wrapped around the tree.
So I go out to this church. I talked to the pastor, and he says, you know, it was divine intervention that they happened to be out cleaning, doing this cleanup that day at the church, and they heard a noise. And next thing you know, they can hear screaming in the woods, and they see these 4 little children running to them for help. And as I'm getting more of this story, I'm learning that this dad was actually shot.
If you'd have seen the condition of the car, just the accident alone, and to know that a gunshot went off, that, yeah, angel of mercy was hovering over them.
And so I do a little bit more digging, and I get in touch with someone named Nathan. Nathan is the father-in-law of the victim, Nick Clavier. So I interview him, and he explains that his grandchildren were in the car, and they had gotten into an accident.
They're given 2 scenarios. One is a road rage, another is an accidental shooting from his gun. They did find the gun in the car.
We have some breaking news in the investigation into the bizarre shooting death of a Chesterfield father. Family members of Nick Clavier confirmed to CBS 6 that investigators have ruled his death an accident.
So the months go by, and I get a call. And he keeps telling me the kids are having nightmares. They swear that this vehicle pulled up next to them, and his 9-year-old granddaughter had said that someone shot her dad. I believed it, but I just felt like it was irresponsible to worry the entire Chesterfield County area and throw the police under the bus, that this was a completely different story than they were saying. I needed more. So that day would come, December 2016. Ballistics come back. The ballistics just didn't match. They determined that the bullet that was found in Nick's brain could not have been fired from his weapon. I remember calling my executive producer, Mike, and saying, we're onto something here. We have what we need to pursue this story. But what I didn't have at that time was I didn't have any relationship with this grieving widow. I knew her name was Melody, I knew she was private, and I knew really she really didn't want to talk to me.
As soon as I saw him, I knew that I was there to say my goodbye, which was tough, which was really, really tough. It's Friday night, October 23rd, 2015. I'm packing for a road trip with my mom and my sister to Delaware for my uncle's retirement dinner as chief of police. The next morning was when I was heading out. We were pulling down the road, and he come running out the front door waving his arms to get our attention. And so my mom rolls down the window, and she yelled out, you know, "What'd she forget now?" And he got this look on his face and he said, "Oh, my kiss?" And so he came over, gave me a kiss, told me they'd miss me and he loved me. And a little while later, I had sent him a text and, just said that I loved him. And I didn't get a response. And when I called his phone, the police answered, and they asked me if I was in any relation to Nick Clavier, and I told them I was his wife, and they proceeded to tell me that there had been an accident and that the children were okay and that Nick was being taken to the hospital to be looked at. They really didn't indicate just how serious it was, but in my gut, I just kind of knew something wasn't right. I immediately started to head back home. It was a 5-hour drive home. I got to the hospital. First thing I did was went into the bathroom and threw up because nerves, I guess. And I took the elevator up to the ICU. And they took me to his room. I walked in. He had tubes, IVs, wires everywhere. His head was wrapped up, but you could tell from his forehead it was swollen. They told me that part of the bullet was rested in the back of his head and that there was no repair for this, that there was nothing that they could do to save him. And I remember screaming to the top of my lungs, and it was almost like, that bad dream where you're a small child and you're screaming and no one can hear you. Walking out of that hospital room was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, because the man that I loved was laying on that bed, the person I had promised to spend my whole life with, and I was leaving, and he couldn't come with me. I know I started to tell them, and Michaela immediately broke down. She kept saying, "No, Mom, no." And I said, "I'm so sorry." And she looked up at me and she said, "Mom, did they catch him?" That was the very first thing she said to me. As a child, if you'd have seen your dad shoot himself in a moment of raw emotion, that would not have been her statement. The first couple of weeks, we really didn't talk about it much. It was kind of just surviving minute to minute. We were all just kind of walking around like zombies. Little by little, they would say stuff. It was like just something would trigger a memory. And, Michaela said, "Mom, I remember the car pulling off quickly around us. I remember seeing the car drive off after shooting Dad." And I said, "What do you mean you remember seeing the car, honey?" I said, "Was somebody there too?" And in my mind, my first thought was, okay, a witness. And she said, "No, Mommy, I saw the gun. I saw the man. And they went speeding off after Daddy got shot." When I asked them why they would never re-interview the children, they told me that they didn't want to further traumatize the children by interviewing them. Of course, I looked at the officer and I said, with all due respect, they watched their father's head get blown off. The damage is done. There is no further trauma. And they came to the house and they told me that they were closing out the case and it was being ruled an accident. We think that his gun accidentally fired and that as a result, he was shot from his own weapon. I think initially, I just accepted what they said because I felt like, okay, well, they've investigated this, they know. But it never really felt right. But when I got that phone call from the medical examiner saying that the ballistics had come back and that the bullet did not match his gun, and I immediately started saying, oh my God, that's great. Because to me, it was like, okay, he did not do this. And I hung up the phone, I immediately called the detective. And I said, so are we reopening the case now? And he told me no. They felt like this was still an accident.
I saw the guy pointing a gun and I saw the car. I saw a whole lot.
They saw far more than any child should ever have to see. He was not the type of man who would take his own life in front of his children. So I went to this meeting and I sat down with them, and the officers explained to me that yes, the ballistics didn't match, however, that there was a possibility that he fired the wrong caliber of bullet from his gun. They had given me different scenarios where they said like maybe it was altered to fit into his gun, or that maybe he got it from the shooting range, where sometimes they reload bullets, and all these different things that just didn't seem right to me. I left this meeting feeling angry, confused, frustrated, and hopeless, really.
With the car wrapped around a tree and smoking, and her father critically injured inside the vehicle.
At that point, my dad had given me the name of a reporter who had initially interviewed with them when this all had happened, and he felt very comfortable. He said he really felt like she was genuine in her concern for our family. And I thought about it for a very long time, and I really fought with what to do, because I didn't in any way want to bash the police or discredit them, but I felt like this wasn't right. And so I finally made the decision, you know what, I am going to meet and I am going to just talk to her, feel it out.
So we decided that we were going to meet in person. She was going to bring me all of the information she had, and I was so impressed with the homework she did. She had gone to ballistics experts. She had gone to the gun range. So a couple days later, we had a date set, and we met with Melody. And I don't think I was prepared for the emotions of that day.
There's nothing I can do to fix it. There's nothing I will ever be able to do to fix it. And so at this point, as mom, I can't say, well, the bad guy was caught.
And the more and more she talked about her daughter, Michaela, it was so powerful. I had to ask her a tough question. Would you be open to allowing your 9-year-old, would you trust me to interview her? I felt like the only real eyewitness in that car we needed to hear from. More importantly, the police needed to hear from her.
In that moment, I was thinking that somebody had tried to hurt us or my dad, and all I knew was I had to be strong for my little siblings.
As a mother, I was not prepared for how mature this little girl was and how she poured her heart out to me that day.
I saw the guy pointing a gun, and I saw the car. I saw a whole lot. I was just sitting there looking out my window, listening to music, when I heard a loud noise. Saw the car drive off really fast, but I didn't catch the license plate.
When they veered off the road, they went over an embankment. I honestly don't know how my children walked out of that accident.
I looked over, I saw my dad. He was bleeding and blood was going everywhere.
Describing what no adult should ever see, much less a child. Witnessing her father's last moments.
It was not something very pleasant.
So Michaela got out of the car. She got the younger kids out through the back so they wouldn't have to see any more than necessary. Then they ran through the woods to the church to get help. Michaela didn't have a voice for about 3 days after, from where she was just screaming to the top of her lungs, help me, somebody help my dad.
I wish they would reopen the case and try and solve it. I want to find out what happened. Because he was a really nice man. He didn't deserve to die.
I've been doing this for 25 years, and I want you to know I've never in my life met someone more brave than you. Right after I started interviewing Michaela, she had this piece of paper in her hand, and I'm like, what's that, Michaela?
It's the car that I saw when I was riding off the side of the road after my dad had just been shot.
I was just like looking at all the detail on this car. It was a greenish color car with a black pinstripe. I looked at her and I said, I promise you, I will do everything in my power to get you answers and to find justice for your daddy and for everyone to know the truth. So Mama Bear is going to make sure they listen to you, okay? I promise you that. So I get in touch with the Chesterfield Police Department. I was very open with them. I was very transparent. I made sure that every step of the way they knew what I had. Because honestly, I was waiting for that aha moment of, well, Laura, this is what you don't know. And really, they couldn't give me that because they had to protect their investigation. So I said, we're moving forward, and we'd like to offer you the opportunity to do an interview. They declined at that point, and they provided us with a statement. Another critical part about this story is we needed a gun expert to show us what bullets went into what guns, and to tell us exactly what we had been hearing from everyone else, that they were not going to fit into that weapon.
When you take the magazine out and you try to load this bullet in there, there's no way, I mean, it's obvious, it cannot go in there. Then when you cock this gun back and lock it back, even if you try this, there's no possible way, it won't even fit down the barrel. So what I'm telling you today, on everything that you've shown me, the documentation that you've shown me, is that there's no way that this gun that was recovered out of that car could have shot this bullet.
The police department said, due to the fact that these new witnesses have come forward, we're going to take another look.
The markings on the bullet indicated that it could not have been fired from the .380 pistol recovered from the vehicle. Makes it impossible to exclude homicide.
So May 12th, 2017, we go on the air with this. And at that point, you see the gun expert, you hear from Melody, and you hear from 9-year-old Michaela pour her heart out in one of the most emotional interviews of my career. Within 24 hours of my report, I heard from at least 2 witnesses who were at the church that day saying, thank you for doing this story. Those children, from the minute that they ran out of those woods, said to us, someone just shot our daddy. So where did that information get lost? I don't know. At the time, those witnesses were afraid to talk to us, but they did go to police after our report, and the police re-interviewed those witnesses. 10 days after our report, the case is changed from cleared to pending. So the police department said, due to the fact that these new witnesses have come forward, we're going to take another look.
Will you sit down? I have something to tell you.
Okay.
So today, I had a meeting with the captain of criminal investigations, and they are going to move the case to a pending status, which means that they are going to re-review all the case files, and they would like to re-interview you.
Tell me your first reaction to this news.
Well, really happy and excited that they're opening the case back up.
It gave her the comfort of knowing somebody believed her. And just that little bit of validation for her, it helped heal. It helped move her forward in her grieving process.
But I just feel like they said from the beginning that the evidence just didn't support anything but this being an accidental incident. So about a month after the police changed the case to a pending status, we learned from Melody that the FBI was now getting involved. We also learned that they were going to be retesting Nick's gun. So I think at that point she realized this isn't just lip service, that they're actually going to do something about it. And the one thing that she had really wanted in all this was for her children to be heard. Because after all, they were one of the few eyewitnesses to that day. I mean, they bushwhacked this entire field all the way down to the dirt.
We just wanted to make sure that we were being good to our word and true to our word. You know, we said that we would do a thorough review, and that's exactly what we wanted to do.
Our initial report aired in May of 2017. My communication with police was monthly. I checked in with them every single month, every few weeks really, to see has there been any change in status with the Clavier investigation. So December of 2017 comes along, and Melody lets us know that the field where Nick's car crashed was going to be completely cleared. And I just want to give you an idea. This field was heavily filled with brush and trees and, you know, tall grass and weeds. And they bring out, I mean, they bushwhack this entire field all the way down to the dirt. And they bring in dozens of recruits, and they have these metal detectors, and they are going inch by inch by inch through this field. That December 2017 day is when I felt like there was a real turn of events in communication with the police department. For the very first time, Chesterfield Police went on the record with me, went on camera with me, explaining why they were out there.
Really, this is the only way that we can say that we've actually done everything we could logically to find out where the truth is in all this.
Now, granted, at that point in time, they weren't calling it a crime. This was still just under investigation after it had been ruled an accident, despite the fact that ballistics had shown that the bullet in his brain did not match his gun. But they were starting from scratch. So at this point in time, the field is getting cleared, the gun has been retested, the kids have been re-interviewed by the FBI. You would think, you know, they're not just trying to appease a grieving widow. You know, they have put in a lot of manpower in this investigation, and I know that Melody was very hopeful at that point in time.
They went and looked at every possible aspect as if this was a fresh new case.
These fresh set of eyes were not just average detectives. These fresh set of eyes were part of a group that's called the Unsolved Major Investigations Group.
That particular unit is really established to take a look at some of the more challenging cases that traditional investigative methods haven't resolved the case.
We would come to find out that they would have these roundtable meetings and they would discuss every theory. Somebody in this roundtable discussion said, let's revisit the entry wound of, you know, where the bullet went in. It was right around Nick's temple. They always had assumed that that was soot from a close range shot. Let's re-examine this. They said, now remember, the weather stripping on the car, the piece that goes around the window, had a piece missing from it. It had a dent. What if that is what was on Nick's head because a bullet came from the outside? That is when they were onto something. And I believe that is really what made them think this shot did not come from inside this vehicle. This shot came from outside the vehicle. And we need to change this case to a homicide investigation. The ATF came forward and they offered a $5,000 reward for information. This was a huge piece of the puzzle.
You don't want to think of yourself as being happy that your husband was murdered, but in our situation, having had to fight for so long to get somebody to acknowledge that, it was huge for us. It really brought us closer as a family. In the end, the whole world knew indefinitely that Nick was in no way, shape, form, or fashion capable of harming himself or putting our children in harm's way.
The ATF came forward and they offered a $5,000 reward for information in this case. This was a huge piece of the puzzle.
Sometimes it takes a witness coming forward that hadn't come forward before.
And we would learn that that's what they needed. Someone came forward that knew something that fit exactly to what happened that day that would lead them to another person who would back up that story and tell of another crime that happened 12 hours later.
Flashing lights lit up one Southside neighborhood around 12:30 Sunday morning.
I heard gunshots last night, but I ain't really pay attention to it.
Police tell us at this time no arrests have been made and they are still searching for a suspect.
A man by the name of Mark Jefferson would be killed in the city of Richmond hours after Nick. And it would be those ballistics from both crime scenes that would tell police that the bullet in both of those murders were fired from the same weapon.
And in this particular case, we were able to make a match and determine that the subject that killed Mr. Clavier had also taken the life of another individual in Richmond that same day.
Again, I really did not believe that I would ever see this case solved. I didn't feel like I would ever have all the answers. And lo and behold, September 25th, 2018, almost 3 years, 1 month shy of 3 years since he had been shot, I go into a meeting and I'm told, we have all of your answers.
But there was some road rage activity that happened on Hall Street that day, which led to weapons being brandished and a shot being fired, which eventually led to him being struck with a bullet and killed.
I immediately broke down. As soon as they showed a picture, they had a slide presentation for me, and as soon as they showed a picture, I just wept and I wept and I wept. It was very, very difficult for me to look at a photograph knowing that is the man that took my husband's life.
Years before Nick Clavier's murder, Jerquel Cheatham was considered a most wanted fugitive by the U.S. Marshals. He was on that list that they felt like his violent crime spree started from possibly the age of 14.
In this particular case, charges won't be brought. He's since passed on.
We're in front of the club right now. One of the victims has been shot.
Cheatham would be murdered inside this Richmond nightclub 3 months after police say he killed 2 men in 24 hours. So within 24 hours, police say this man, Jerquel Cheatham, took 2 lives and destroyed 2 families.
Hopefully being prosecuted by a higher authority.
This was somebody that wasn't afraid to pull out his weapon, police say. And it's someone that was known to them, and someone who was dangerous. And someone who pulled up to a car full of kids and pulled that trigger. And the rest is history.
I know he's watching, and I know he's proud of us, and I know he's happy that we've fought for him. The first night after we found out what happened that day, and we found out that Cheatham was deceased, it was the first night that Jacob didn't get up in the middle of the night.
That made me kind of happy because now I don't have to live in fear.
Questioning the kids on how they felt about all of this, I said, what are you feeling? And Jacob got real quiet. And I said, are you okay? And he was like, I'm really sad for his mom. And I said, why are you sad for his mom? He said, well, I know that he shot my daddy. It's like, but I'm sure his mommy really misses him. And it just broke my heart. But at the same time, I felt a huge sense of pride that that little boy, all that he's been through, he still has compassion.
I am very relieved that he won't be able to hurt anybody else. And he won't be able to hurt any of my family again.
From the very beginning, Michaela never changed her story.
One of the things that really stood out to me that when I met with police and they told me exactly what happened that day was that Michaela's sketch of the vehicle that she says pulled up next to them that day was almost an exact match to the vehicle that actually pulled up next to them that day. I mean, 9 years old. She watches her dad get shot. She tries to stop the bleeding. She takes her siblings out of the car into safety. And then she draws almost an exact replica of the vehicle that sped away in a moment's notice.
That young lady is a courageous young lady. I can't imagine what she's gone through. I hope that in, 11 or 12 more years, she comes and sees me for a job. Because we need people like that to serve in law enforcement, people that are principled, that are cool-headed, and that can look tragedy in the face and do the things that are right. They may not be popular, but they're right. And so I hope she comes and sees me for a job.
It's been a long, very long, difficult journey. As a mom, I can say this is the hardest thing that I've ever been through. And I would not wish this on any mother.
We definitely have gotten a lot of feedback on this story, mostly positive in support of the family. But after it did come out that both men, Nick and Jerquel Cheatham, displayed their weapons, of course, there were people who questioned the fact that a father would pull out his weapon with his children in his car. So I had to ask that question to his mother and to Melody.
I've been thinking about that a lot. I try to picture when Nick realized that there were some bad people, some very bad people, and he probably was not thinking about himself. He was thinking, I've got to protect my children.
Nick was not the type to back down. And I also know Nick would have never pulled his weapon with the kids unless he really felt there was a threat. He actually would take them shooting and, would go over the things like you never aim a gun at somebody unless you intend to shoot them.
Now, since our report, since this was changed to a homicide, Nick's death certificate has been changed, and that was huge for Melody, not because of insurance or anything else, but because she has that piece of paper that shows that her husband did not shoot himself, that somebody else did that day and took his life.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Daddy. Happy birthday to you.
His life was taken way too soon. He was robbed from us. But nobody can rob the impression that he left on this world.
Like, now that it's all done, how do you feel about this?
It's been such a roller coaster journey. It's such a rewarding feeling at the end of the day to see this changed family. To accompany Melody that day to one of the most private places, to where she went to the cemetery and walked up with flowers and told her husband,
"We finally did it."
I try really hard to always not get too attached to a story, because at the end of the day I have to be impartial. I have to make sure that I'm telling all sides of the story, and I made sure that I still kept my journalistic integrity in check. But you can't help not getting emotionally invested as a human being, as a mother, as a wife.
I know that there's no way that we would have ever come to this point without the news reports, without the community saying, hey, this doesn't add up to us either, and asking questions. Because without the pressure, you know, there may not have been a reason to say, yeah, okay, let's take another look. I really hope that protocols can be reevaluated for the children's sake, because I do believe that things could have been handled a little differently on their end that could have bettered their odds.
We heard the family's concerns. We did look at ourselves and ask some questions.
We invested tremendous resources into this case, and in the end, we got it right. It wasn't as quickly as we would have liked or as the family would have liked, but our job is to get it right, not to get it done fast.
I have a great amount of respect for the police department and the men and women who put countless hours into investigating this. I really do, and I appreciate everything that they went through to get us to this point.
I have shed a lot of tears in this case. I've been through the highs with them, and I've been through the lows with them. And I can tell you that it has been one of the most rewarding stories I've done. I become emotionally attached to these families, and it's the way I would want someone to treat my own family. God forbid we were ever to deal with something like this.
The end of a chapter. I sent him a message. It said, I missed you so much, Nick. I can't believe you're gone. The house is just a reminder of how much we really need you. Michaela is having a really hard time accepting that you're gone. The others are heartbroken as well. Nikki, I love you so much, and I feel so lost. I keep waiting for you to call and say you're coming home. Of course, I know that's not true. I hope you know I held you till your last breath. I promised I would never leave you, and the hardest thing I've ever done was walking out of that hospital room. Even though you were gone, it was hard leaving the man that I love lay there. I don't even know where to go from here. You were my world, and now my world is shattered. I missed you. I love you forever. I think he'd be really proud of us. I think he would. I think he would be proud of not only how we fought for him, but how we have survived. We've not let this destroy our lives.